Florida State is off to a nightmarish start to this college football season, man. Going into this year, they were expected to win over 9 games. They were the favorite to win the ACC. And we're only 2 weeks into the season, and the Seminoles are 0-2 in conference play, which essentially means that in terms of their playoff hopes, their season is over. You know, you got people asking, is Boston College and Georgia Tech actually quality teams? That's not really a good question to be having in the defense of Florida State, because regardless of how good those teams are, it's unacceptable for Florida State to get dominated the way they did in Doak Campbell against Boston College. Losing to Georgia Tech in the hard-fought game is one thing, but against Boston College, that team flat out looked like they quit. And there are so many holes that this team has. I mean, DJ Uiagalelei, look, most of us who have been watching this dude ever since his days at Clemson knew what to expect from him. He most likely was going to be an average quarterback at best, but I don't think any of us, including myself, were expecting DJU to just look unserviceable out there. I mean, he looks like he belongs starting for an FCS program than he does at the Division I level. I mean, this is absolutely embarrassment. This is an embarrassment what Florida State is putting on the field at quarterback, to say the least. I mean, DJU can't hit open wide receivers. He isn't really that athletic. He has a lot of size, but he's not really a great athlete. He's not Anthony Richardson. And you can't put all of Florida State's struggles on DJU. The wide receivers aren't doing him no favors. I mean, they're struggling to get open. They can't create separation. And when they do get open, they can't catch the damn football. And Florida State only has 2 dependable wide receivers, Malik Benson and the number 1 wide receiver that was going off against Boston College, the only dude who was able to put some points up on the board for FSU. Your offensive line can't open up holes in the run game, and your defense looks soft and lacks physicality. Florida State has had so many missed tackles. It's been downright disgusting. The DJ Uiagalelei experience has been extremely underwhelming, to the point you're wondering when Mike Norvell and that coaching staff are going to pull the trigger, and they're just going to say enough is enough. We got to bench you, because you are pretty confident that you gave him a pretty big sum of cash when it came to NIL money. So it kind of complicates the decision to bench him, because whoever was responsible for coming up with that NIL money is probably going to feel some kind of way that they invested so much money into a quarterback that got benched 2 weeks into the season. But for Mike Norvell, you're not in a situation where you can afford to play politics. It doesn't matter how much money you're paying DJU. This dude is dog crap. Absolute dog crap. And it sets a bad precedence in the locker room when you continue to allow a guy to be this bad, stink up the joint, cost you games every week, and you refuse to bench him only because what he's getting paid. If Mike Norvell is somewhat of a decent coach, he would do what's in the best interest of the team and bench DJ Uiagalelei. Brock Glenn can't be this bad to the point where he's overthrowing 2 wide open wide receivers inside of the 15. It's embarrassing, the quarterback play that DJU is putting out there. And Mike Norvell, there are questions about just how good of a head coach is this dude. Was he really carried by Jordan Travis? Florida State fans right now want this guy's head on a platter. I mean, they want to behead this dude down here in Tallahassee because they felt like they were fooled. They were having the assumption coming into this year that Mike Norvell had this program climbing to being a potential national championship team within the span of 2 years. Most people have Florida State making it into the playoffs this season. But with them getting out to this 0-2 start, it's pretty evident that they were extremely overrated. And why Florida State fooled so many people this year in terms of how people felt about how far they could go this year is off recency bias. Last year was the best season Florida State has had since the Jameis Winston era. And people took that season and they used it as a measuring tool to evaluate how good Florida State was going to be this year. The problem with that is they overlooked the inefficiencies that this team had at several key positions walking into this year. And their only excuse for overlooking those flaws was, man, Mike Norvell and that coaching staff, I trust them. When in college football, the teams that consistently win 10-plus game a year, they always recruit at a pretty high level. Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, they don't have rebuilding years because they reload due to how elite the recruiting is. Florida State's recruiting is solid, but it's not good enough to avoid rebuilding years like the one you're currently in right now. Mike Norvell has been heavily dependent on the transfer portal, but I don't feel like Mike Norvell builds Florida State's roster strictly via the portal. He does have a good amount of guys on that team who he recruited through high school, but he now has to be able to develop them if Florida State wants to be able to get back to the level that they were last year. Last year's FSU team had a good blend of guys that were brought in via recruiting, but also guys who were brought in via the transfer portal, but they weren't just one-year rentals like Keon Coleman. Johnny Wilson, Jordan Travis, they were on Florida State's roster for the last couple of years. You can develop guys from the portal. It's not that hard to do. Jordan Travis wasn't just a one-year rental. You know, he was on Florida State's team for about 3-4 years, and Mike Norvell developed him. You can't say Mike Norvell can't develop quarterback if he developed Jordan Travis. As a Miami fan, I remember the first time Jordan Travis played against the Canes. The only thing the dude could do was run the football. Every time he came in when he first got to FSU, you knew he was going to run the football. But over the next couple of years, he improved as a passer. So you can't just knock Mike Norvell for being able to elevate and properly develop Jordan Travis. He does know how to develop quarterbacks. If you can develop a guy from the portal that's been with your team for 3 years, you can develop guys out of high school. Where Mike Norvell went wrong is his evaluation of DJU. I don't know what he saw in DJ Uiagalelei from his film last year at Oregon State that made him think he was going to be a quality starter, but he needs to go back to the drawing board and rethink what quarterback is a good fit for his system. The problem with coaches in today's age in football is that even if you get a quarterback that doesn't necessarily look like a perfect fit for their system, these coaches' egos are so big that they think they can fix everybody. They think that you put any QB in their system and it's going to work out, and you're seeing it backfire right in Mike Norvell's face. DJU didn't look good at Oregon State. He got benched for Cade Klubnik at Clemson in the ACC Championship game. You see how terrible Cade Klubnik looks like right now. There was nothing that showed evidence DJU was going to be the guy to repeat the success that Jordan Travis had and get Florida State to the point where they were last year on the brink of being a playoff team. And before this season started, I told you guys straight up, Florida State and Missouri were the two overrated teams heading into this season because they were being judged based off the recency bias. They don't recruit at a consistent enough level to be able to sustain consistent 10-win seasons regardless of how easy the schedule may be. Now, should Mike Norvell get fired if Florida State goes 4-8 or 5-6, which there's a realistic possibility that that happens because this team can't do anything. When you can't tackle nobody, you can't block nobody, you don't have a quarterback that can hit open receivers and your receivers can't catch anything, how many games can you realistically win? I mean, I saw somebody on Twitter say that we could be seeing FSU versus Florida being played on Tubi. That could be the game to decide who ends up getting their third win of the year. Mark Norvell isn't a bad coach. I still stand on that. Despite being a Hurricanes fan, I can put my fandom and bias aside enough to see when there's a problem with coaching, and I don't see it with Mike Norvell. I see this just being a down year for Florida State. For the people out there that want to fire this dude because Florida State could have their worst season under him, you're being too overly emotional. Florida State, prior to this season, has improved record-wise and performance-wise every single year under Mike Norvell. Their first season wasn't that good. Their second season, they improved. Last year, year 3, they went undefeated in conference play, and you could make the argument that they deserve to be in the college football playoffs. You can't overlook 3 years of steady improvement and fire a dude just because of one bad year. Do you know how bad, or do you remember how bad the Willie Taggart era was? There was no growth. There was no improvement. It was just straight downhill ever since you hired Willie Taggart. And I got a therapist, believe it or not, that actually was part of Florida State's alumni back in their collective. And he told me, I believe it was before they played Boise State one year, that they already had the buyout money ready for Willie Taggart. They were just waiting to see how far things were going to hit the fan until they eventually pulled the trigger. And Florida State just gave Mike Norvell a new, fresh extension back in February when there was the chance he could have left and took the Alabama job. So Mike Norvell isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and I don't feel it would be the right decision for Florida State to fire him off one bad season. Every coach has a down year every once in a while. Not everybody's Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, where their down years are 2 losses. Lincoln Riley has been a consistent 10-win-plus coach every year. Last year, he only won 7 games at USC. Sometimes as a head coach, like the situation that Mike Norvell's in right now, with you having a bad season, you need years like this to help you reflect so you can change things that can help you avoid having similar seasons like this in the future. As much as it pains Florida State fans to hear that this is a rebuilding year, they got no chance to compete, it is a disappointment when you think about how bad things ended for you last year. You had a great season. You went 12-0, but everybody kind of forgets about it because of how badly you got embarrassed by Georgia. But you can't define the head coach based off one bad season and just overlook the 3 previous seasons that he had of growth and improvement. You know, he gave Florida State their best season in a decade. You got to show him some respect for that. You got to give this dude some time. It's not like you're in the same situation that Florida's in with Billy Napier, where you haven't had any growth at all. Florida has been terrible since year 1 under Billy Napier, and they're still terrible year 3 under Billy Napier. You see no improvement. That's the sign you need to fire a coach. You shouldn't fire somebody off one down season when they're coming off the best season in over a decade for this program. This is a bad year for Florida State. This is just a bad team. And I can't tell you guys with confidence that they're going to turn this around and they're going to win 6 games. It could be really ugly for Florida State. But having a down season like this could do more good for this program than it could do negatively. And I believe that Mike Norvell and this staff knew what they were in for this year. Are they surprised that they started out 0-2? Definitely. They probably didn't see that coming. But if you were to ask them before the season, what was their confidence level in terms of them being able to get back to where they were last year and their ability to compete for a national championship, if they were being honest with you, they probably would have told you, yeah, we may not be as good as what last year's team was. Last year's team had about 4 or 5 NFL players on it. It's hard to just simply replace that production overnight when you're consistently recruiting outside of the top 10. Florida State, recruiting-wise, ranks around 13th to 15th in the nation. That's not good enough to avoid a rebuilding season. So for Florida State, this obviously has been a nightmare of a season for them. It's been a massive disappointment. And there's a great chance that they don't even have a above 500 record. I don't know who they can beat. Next week, they got to play Memphis, who a good amount of people out there got being in the 12-team college football playoffs this year. I don't know if they can even beat Cal, SMU, Clemson, or Miami. Things look really shaky right now for Florida State, and there's a lot of things wrong with this program that they're going to have to fix, and they aren't things that can just be fixed overnight. You're probably going to have to fire some guys on that coaching staff as well, and whoever was responsible for telling you to go after DJU.